Good morning, friends. Let me invite you to the UGC's Chetana lecture series. We have been conducting these lectures for quite some time, inviting experts to speak about the best practices in higher education. Today, the topic is reimagining higher education for the 21st century. We have great speakers to speak on that topic. This program is also live streamed on all our social media platforms of UGC. And these lecture videos will continue to be available on our social media platforms, which can be watched at any time later in future. And typically, our lectures are watched by students, faculty members, and heads of educational institutions from across the country. Friends, as you know, the conventional thinking about education is that education is required for employability, social and economic mobility. While that is definitely true, but the real purpose of education is something that is generally hidden from our view. The main purpose of education is to help our students to acquire the required knowledge and skills so that they can use this knowledge and the skills to find pragmatic solutions to the challenges that arise in their own lives and in the lives of people around them. But more importantly, the central idea of education is to bring back the attention of our students to what is known as human agency. In social sciences, we define human agency as one's capacity to determine and make meaning from their environment through purposive consciousness and reflective and creative action. That is the ultimate goal of education. That means we need to come away from this teacher-centric teaching learning processes. I recollect a shloka whose origin is supposed to be in Mahabharata. And this shloka says that only 1/4 of education comes from the teacher. And the other 1/4 of education comes from the critical thinking of the student. And 1/4 of education comes through peer learning by working with the teams. by making mistakes and learning from those mistakes and learning from each other. And the last one-fourth of education comes through experience, experiential learning. And that's the reason why in national education policy, we are now coming up with many reforms to make the learner the center of the teaching learning processes. And today I'm very glad that we have two speakers who will be speaking about the alternative educational approaches. We have Mr. Sonam Wangchuk. He is the founder and director of Students' Educational and Cultural Movement of Ladakh. And also he is the director of Himalayan Institute of Alternatives, Ladakh. Welcome, Mr. Wangchuk. We are privileged to have you here on this platform. He will speak for 20 minutes, and that lecture will be followed by Mrs. Geetanjali Angmo. She is the co-founder and director of Himalayan Institute of Alternatives, Ladakh. And she will talk about the 5 pillars of education that are being practiced in their institution to ready the youth for the 21st century. Thank you, Geetanjali ji, for being with us. She will also speak for 20 minutes. And after that, if there are any questions from the audience, both the speakers will answer those questions. So with those introductory comments, let me now welcome Mr. Sonam Wangchuk to deliver his lecture.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, and warm greetings from the mountains of Ladakh. I hope you can see the background. It's the real background, not a virtual background. I am in Ladakh. So the cold and high mountains are very different from where you are. But what we have in common is a passion for education, a passion for innovation in education. So therefore, my warm greetings. And as mentioned, we have now values like experiential education, critical thinking, transdisciplinary, which have come down in the national education policy and therefore are no longer or should not be alternative ways of educating. This should become mainstream, and that's our biggest opportunity as well as challenge, because it's one thing to have them in the policies in paper. The challenge would be in bringing it down to practice. And in that regard, I thought I would share with you a story, a journey of our interventions and initiatives in education in Ladakh, which started as an alternative in experiential, hands-on, lived education, but now it's being taken into mainstream, and we want to see it happen and reach the last child in the country and the world. So just to give you a little background, where I am is like closer to outer space than planet Earth, at least 11,500 feet closer to outer space. And if you could see behind, it looks more like Mars or Moon than planet Earth. And in these harsh conditions, actually, people are pushed to think and act. So I'll share some experiences from there. I'm sorry if some aircrafts disturb you. That's a part of the game, because I'm outdoors. I thought it would be good for everyone. But anyway, so I'll share with you what I started as a personal journey from experience in my schools, where it was all bookish and, memorization as a child in Ladakh. When I was taken to a school, that's the schools that I found. And before that, for 9 years, I had no schools to go. I was happily in a very little village, learning from farmers, from animals, from the mountains, from the trees and uh, fields that farmers plowed. And I always tease my friends that when you all were learning about roots and shoots from pages of textbooks, so mostly faded pages of pictures of textbooks, I was learning on the farm with the farmers how the seeds go into the ground, roots go down, shoots come up, and leaves unfurl without having to go in the mumbo jumbo of LEAF leaf and LEAVES leaves. So this was completely spared to me, and I could learn directly from the phenomenon of nature by connecting to them, and with my mother as my teacher and my mother tongue as the medium, which is now has become a luxury very few children can afford. But believe me, the luxury of mother tongue is a very strong foundation on which you can then acquire any knowledge, any language. I used to speak only Ladakhi till 9 years, but ended up speaking some 9 languages, each taking not more than 6 months to a year. So it doesn't take schools and teachers and textbooks to learn. It's mostly about curiosity of the child. If it is intact, we can always have a child learning from anywhere, school or no school, textbook or no textbook. So in that context, how I was brought up in a Ladakhi village. At 9 years of age, I was sent to schools, which was not a very pleasant experience in the beginning because the schools were of that kind. But later I got the opportunity of seeing some very good schools, some Kendriya Vidyalayas, which were one of the best experiences I had, guided by this and more by my experience during my engineering. I was doing my mechanical engineering, and because of some circumstances, I had to teach students to earn the expense of my engineering. And that was the best thing to happen to me, because when I was teaching the students, I came face to face with the realities of school system and what it does to children, especially in remote areas like Ladakh, indigenous people who are not so connected with the cities and what is in the textbooks. So we ended up in a place like Ladakh where the temperatures are like -20 outdoors and -5 in the classroom, children having to memorize things like A for apple, B for ball, which is fine. But when it came to F for fan, it became a big problem for the children because they can't understand. And if you ask the teacher, what is this contraption, fan? The teacher would also scratch his head and say, son, I have never seen one, but I'm told it keeps you cool. Children could never understand why people need to be colder than they are with such irrelevant, examples. So that's why contextual, which is one of the main features in our new education policy, education needs to be contextual, is so important. For children in the mountains, education was a more destructive and debilitating process than an empowering process, with each example making no sense whatsoever. Like we grow rice in monsoon rains. In the mountains, we don't even know of rice. We don't grow rice. There's no monsoon of any kind. Yet you have to write, we grow monsoon rice in the monsoon rains. And if you don't write that, you get 0 and are failed. So in these circumstances, Ladakhi children used to fail by 95% in the board exams. And this was just unbelievable for any system to produce 95% failure. That's when I started questioning the system rather than blaming the children. When I finished my engineering, this experience of teaching moved me so much that when my friends were going to Silicon Valley, I came back to Ladakh to change the education system here. So I wanted to make education contextual and not just memorization of facts from books, but rather felt, lived experiences. And that led us to starting an alternative school after various other things, which improved the pass percentage in Ladakh from 5% to 75%. These were interventions in government schools. But finally, we said after 75%, each percent will take much more energy. So we started focusing on the 25% who were still failing. So what I'm saying is even the failing 25% are not failures. If you give the right environment, they can be bright stars also. It's only because schools are failing, system is failing, that children are declared failures. So we started a special school for them, a very different school where actually the admission criteria is a failure in the exams rather than your grades and percentage and marks. So this school is where I am today. And I'll show you, for you to get an idea in a while, a video about this alternative approach, which is now becoming mainstream, where we said students should live their education. They shouldn't be told and given information. Information is good, but it doesn't help beyond a point. It must be experiential, that they live through. It's also because human young ones have always learned through experience. They've never learned by listening to lectures in the history of human evolution. As hunter gatherers, we were always learning from going, our young ones were always going on, hunts with grown-ups and go through all kinds of pains and risks to life to learn. And nature in return gifted them so much energy for this learning phase. The teenagers and early 20s, they have so much energy. But when we introduce the kind of system that we have of caging them in classrooms and lecturing them, this energy has nowhere to go that nature gifted for learning. It comes out as teenager rage and rebellion, sometimes depression, leading to suicides, drugs, and all kinds of problem among young people. So we said we should steer clear of these and give them the conditions that nature needed for them to learn in the times immemorial. That's how we evolved. So we designed a school with the students. Students designed the school, they built the school physically, and they run the school. And the way they run is they make the school into a little country with a little parliament, with a little government that they themselves elect. And every 2 months, the government changes, and the students actually take charge of all the running of the school. Teachers are in the background. And then the failures also achieve a lot when they have to, learn by experiencing everything from science to political science, which is learned by running the school like a little country, science by building houses that stay warm even in -20. The video will show you more. So what we believe in is that education should not be just intellectual, which is what schools of today have become. And the new education policy tries to bring it out of the head only zone to the hands and heart also. That's why we say we made a mistake following the Western model of 3 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic. That's not education. Education should be 3 H's rather: bright head, skilled hands, and kind heart. Western countries, Western model completely overlooks the kind heart part. That's why we have people who are so self-centered today. They do a little better on the hands part. They are a little more experiential if you look at IB and Cambridge and others than our system. But now with the new education policy, I really hope that we can bring it down to make it truly experiential, with skilled hands also coming down into schools, which is what we have to untrain ourselves, undo the experience so far of what schools in India are, and retrain, reimagine education to be of Yes, bright head, as good or better than the world, but skilled hands that can do things, that can grow things, that can make things, that can repair things, and then kind hearts that think of others also. For India, experiential education is not new. It may be a buzzword in the West. Experiential education and critical thinking and all that is new to the world, but in India, I know at least from 2500 years ago, when Buddha talked of three types of pragya or wisdom, he talked of तीन प्रकार के pragya. Pehla, Shrutmai pragya. Shrutmai pragya is the wisdom of heard things, which is same as read, the wisdom that you acquire by hearing and reading. Well, this is information. This is good, but not enough to make a good human being. And Buddha gave an example. Shrutmai pragya is like drawing lines on a lake, on water. It's erased as you draw. It doesn't last in your being. It goes away. That's Shrutmai Pragya, which is what we mostly do in our schools and universities. The more important next level of education is Chintanmay Pragya, the wisdom of reflection, which is critical thinking, analytical thinking, which the West now talks about. So Chintanmay Pragya makes you further realize and reflect things, which is what now we are talking about. What goes beyond this and what the West doesn't touch as much is the Bhavanamay Pragya, the third level of wisdom. Bhavanamay Pragya is what you experience, what your being learns, not just from eyes, ears. And while Shrutmay Pragya was like lines on water, Chintanmay Pragya is like lines on sand. It lasts much longer than water, but also goes away. Whereas Bhavanamay Pragya, when you experience, when you live physics to make houses that are warm in winter with sun's energy using conduction, convection, radiation, then you don't forget. That's why we say, don't scold the children for forgetting their lessons. Instead, make the lessons unforgettable. And that you can do when you live, when children live political science by running a government of their own. So the third is experiential, Bhavanamay Pragya. And at this point, more than me speaking, we'll share a video which talks about this alternative school where we began, and it made great stars out of failures. You can see what some of these failures became, even in the normal real world, that even toppers dream of. These failures began, and then it will take you into our alternative university model now that we are working on for the last 5 years, which Ms. Gitanjali heads as the co-founder. So that will be of your interest, but it all starts at this school and goes into this alternative university, both of which we very much hope will not remain alternatives, will really become mainstream as it is, practiced in real schools and universities of the world. At this point, may I request Gitanjali, who's there, to share this video for your benefit. Yes, if you can make it full screen. Yeah.
Never let schooling interfere with my education. So said Mark Twain. How about you? Do you miss your school or college days? You perhaps do, but perhaps not for the classrooms and teaching. You actually perhaps wished every day that the school be closed the next day so you could stay home. But here's a school in Ladakh where the most dreaded punishment is to be sent home for 2 weeks, where students learn by doing things, where they engage in various innovations to solve real life problems like climate change, where they run the school themselves like a little country with an elected government and learn management and governance that way. where they learn communication by running the campus newspaper and radio, science by designing and building their own school, solar-heated mud buildings that stay at plus 15 even when minus 15 winters. Kindness and compassion through introspection and meditation. A school where the criteria of admission is not your percentage, but that the conventional system has failed you. Hi, I'm Sonam Wangchuk from Ladakh, a remote mountain region in the Indian Himalayas. 25 years ago, when I was finishing my own engineering education, I saw that schools were a pain for everyone. But for mountain children, it was doubly painful and irrelevant. Children who spoke Ladakhi or Tibetan at home were made to sit all day memorizing in alien languages like Urdu or English. F for fan, S for ship, T for train. Till recently, every year, 95% of the students used to fail in the all-important 10th grade exams. Together with like-minded friends, we launched SECMOL, the Students' Educational and Cultural Movement of Ladakh, and said enough is enough. Working with the government, we rewrote many textbooks, retrained the teachers, and organized the villagers. And the results started changing too. For those who still failed, we started the alternative school that you just saw. And the results. Tewang Rigzin went on to become a top journalist and later became the education minister of Ladakh Hill Council at 27. He had failed his 10th grade 5 times. Stanzin became a filmmaker and has been winning awards across countries. He had failed 4 times. Miss Tinless is today a celebrated social entrepreneur. She had failed 3 times. But now we see that the state of higher education is no better. Not only for Ladakhis, who of course are doubly disadvantaged again, but for you in the big cities too. It's time we change this. We in Ladakh are dreaming again. This time our dream is to create an alternative university that will use all our learnings from the past 25 years. Once again, a hands-on doers university, where the School of Business runs real-life companies on campus. The School of Tourism runs high-end hotels and simple homestays. The School of Education runs innovative schools. The revenues from these sustain the university while the students get free higher education and, of course, hands-on experience. But this is more than a dream now. His Holiness Chetan Rinpoche, one of the top spiritual leaders in Tibetan Buddhism after His Holiness the Dalai Lama, is supporting this cause as the chief patron. The Hill Council government of Ladakh has earmarked roughly 200 acres of land, and the ice stupa artificial glaciers have already started greening this desert. A fully solar-heated, mud-built university township is being planned by some of India's top architects. Together, let's start the next learning revolution, where education is not limited to just the 3 R's, all too much to do with the head alone, where skills of the hands and kindness of the heart are given equal importance. Sure, it would take significant financial resources to materialize this ambitious dream. Recently, I was awarded the prestigious Rolex Award for Enterprise for the ice stupa artificial glacier.
Sonam Wangchuk.
I contribute my Rolex Award as a seed for this cause. Thank you very much. I've decided to contribute the roughly 1 crore rupees as a seed fund to finally raise 150 crore rupees for the first phase of the project. And I very much hope that you all will join me and match this contribution according to your capacities. Together, we can change the face of higher education forever, not just for Ladakh, but for the whole world. So join us. The future has already begun. Thank you very much. My request is Gitanjali. Yeah.
Yes. So I'll continue with the presentation of where we are today in 5 years and about the university project. So as Chairman Sir also said, that we start with what is the purpose of education if we have to design a new education system. Is it merely skills to earn one's livelihood, or is it also social awareness towards better citizenship? Or as Martin Luther King said, is it intelligence and character? Or as has been upheld in India from times immemorial, is it a path of endless self-discovery till we find self-realization? And intuitively, we feel that it is all of the above. But unfortunately, for the past 200-300 years, ever since Industrial Revolution, education has become merely skills to earn one's livelihood. So if we have to go towards all of this, what should the education system be? And as Sonam mentioned, a few of the pillars, I'll take it forward. So what are those pillars of education that are required for the 21st century? So this is the context of Ladakh. It is a trans-Himalayan desert. Temperatures range from -30 to +30. It is in the rain shadow area of the Himalayas. So there are no rainfall here. It's less than 100 mm, and life survives on glacial melts. And in 2017, when I took off from the plane, this is the picture I took from the aircraft of the land, the university land that was to be given to us to set up a university. So as you can see, the context here is hardly a grain of a grass of sand or a drop of water. But a similar experiment 30 years ago had happened, which Sonam just spoke about. Another desert of Faye which looked like that, had been converted into a lush green, surviving and thriving school. So that gave us the confidence that a similar experiment in higher education can be attempted once again. And therefore, this is a picture I took 2 years later. You can see on the left a few experiments of the school happening, and on the right was an artist's impression of how we would like this university to be. And what was beautiful about this was it is audacious in the sense that there is water and greenery. And we thought to ourselves that if a creative, innovative, and a different university can be set up in such harsh conditions, then it can be set up anywhere else in the world. And therefore, it was an endeavor worth trying. And this was the master plan that we did. And based on Indian spirituality of rising and evolving of consciousness from material to spiritual, the master plan was designed in a way of the Upekha path of Buddhism and also of the evolution of consciousness of Sri Aurobindo, where the School of Eco-Responsive Architecture, which is the most material aspect of the university, was to be set up, followed by the School of Energy Studies, School of Ecology, Tourism, Experiential Education, which is a K-12 school, a K-12 residential school within the university, School of Humanities, Entrepreneurship, Leadership, and Spirituality. So these are the 9 schools that are in the process of being set up at Himalayan Institute of Alternatives, Ladakh. So the 5 pillars that we are following here, and which is now helping us scale up this university, is first, contextual education. So all across the world, we see that people are moving away from rural India. Like Uttarakhand, 800 villages are now ghost villages. Same is happening in Ladakh. Not just in India, even in Spain, we can see the trend. It's because the people are not aware of the opportunities of the context, and neither are they empowered to solve the problems of that context. So innovation happens in a certain context, and only when a contextual education from near to far, it is what we can touch, feel, see, and understand, and from there abstract it for other contexts. That is the basis of education. And this is contextual in space, like where one is, one starts with that and then increases the circle of influence. Contextual in time, we cannot repeat what has happened in the past. We have to live the zeitgeist, the Yuga Dharma, as it is called in India. And also near in experience, which is where mother tongue, indigenous wisdom, all these things become important. And I'll give you an example how it is applied in real life. So in Ladakh, temperatures go up to minus 30 degrees. So how should architecture be? Unfortunately, we have 70% of Indian village homes are earth homes built out of mud. But we do not have an architectural school that teaches earth architecture. And earth is in every way eco-friendly. It is a circular economy because when you break the house, it goes back into mud without leaving all the steel and cement, as wastage. But we do not have an architectural school that teaches earth construction. And in Ladakh, we learn from the indigenous wisdom of the past because, unfortunately, because of colonization, we have begun to look westward for all our solutions. But I think we have to look more inwards and into our past, because India is the only civilization which has a 10,000-year-old of unbroken history. So we must have done something right, that we lived sustainably in harmony with nature. So in our university, we learn from our heritage, from our past. For instance, this is the Palace of Saspol, which is 1,500 years old, and it was made of earth. And we call cement homes as pakka and this as kacha, but this has lasted 1,500 years, whereas cement houses last for merely 60 or 70 years. The building where you see me sitting now is also a passive solar building, and it is -5 outside right now, but I'm wearing a single layer, sari, and sitting inside, which is so comfortably at 22 degrees inside. And this is how we learn from our past and reconfigure it, the form. The spirit is retained, but we refigure the form to the modern context. And this is how we have built passive solar homes, for which we've been awarded internationally by the Terra Award in France and Global Award for Sustainable Architecture in Paris. And this is how in Hayal we work. We research. We first find a contextual problem, we research it and make a prototype, and then we pilot those prototypes. So these are the various buildings we have built with the same footprint, but different materials. And then the materials are researched and a lot of temperatures experiments are done. And as you can see, if this is the gray is the outside temperature, a heated building stays between 10 and 15 only, but our buildings stay between 20 and 25 all through winter without any artificial heating. So once we have prototyped these researches, we scale them up in our own university. So around, as we speak, about 1 lakh square feet is being constructed of passive solar heated buildings, which include the academic admin block, the staff facility, student facility, gymnasium, and so on. And having scaled it up at our university, we then have an enterprise arm where we start making it for private clients. And that's where our students learn by doing. So the students do not sit in the classrooms and learn architecture, but they are actually designing and constructing these homes. And instead of we charging fees to them, we pay them stipends, because that was the earlier Gurukul system where education was free And that's how we can make education inclusive for all, because not everybody can pay with money, but they can certainly pay with their sweat and creativity. And once this research is scaled up into private homes, then we make higher end resorts and luxury suites. And finally, from last 2 years, we have started building for the army, because the soldiers live in very tough conditions, and at the cost of transporting fuel for keeping their homes warm is not only expensive financially, but also ecologically, as it generates a lot of carbon. And plus, it is not safe. Very often, the soldiers die from these heating fires than from enemy fires. So 2 years ago, we set up this company which has been making buildings for the army, right from the soldiers to the generals and the guest houses. And the surpluses that so the students are engaged in the building of these buildings, and the surpluses engaged from here actually sustain the School of Eco-Responsive Architecture. And that is how we make our operational costs sustainable and viable without charging student fees. So once then this has been scaled up, we do policy advocacy. And as a result of which, the UT administration of Ladakh has its tourism policy, where all resorts have to be built passive solar. And this is the virtuous cycle that we believe any university should be contributing to. It should not be an insular space, which is, in between the walls, with no relevance to the community or government or corporates and enterprise. Whereas a university should be so applied and so solving contextual problems that its research should be blended with the academics that it is offering for community betterment and development of its context, and leading to entrepreneurial ventures, which are again very conscious and social enterprises. And when these enterprises start doing well, they can be converted into policy for government, because government cannot fund research or prototypes. But once it has been scaled up and demonstrated as a viable solution, it can be made policy. And then the virtuous cycle starts again, where the implementation of that policy and if there are problems can go to future research. So this is how we believe that higher education has to be for the future, not just as a degree giving entity, but as a ecosystem which empowers the youth so that they can take the context and the problems as their own, ownership of that, and use their brains to find out innovative solutions. India can be transformed only one village at a time. We have about 8 lakh villages. And under the age of 25, I think 50% of the population, and I did a rough calculation, it works out to some 800 youth per village, which is a lot to transform any village and to transform this country. Moving ahead, the second pillar of our education is experiential. It is learning by doing. Bhavna mein prajna, as was said, as Varela says, that only what goes through you it becomes a true learning. And our students in the minus 35 winters, they work to set up these ice stupas, which from one village has now been scaled up to about 23 villages, storing 100 million liters of water, and is now being taken to other countries as well in the neighboring countries. And likewise, the passive solar buildings are now being through UNDP being experimented in Afghanistan and others. So I think we are one of the few universities in India that does reverse technology transfer, where technologies which have been innovated and researched at our institute are being used by countries abroad. Like this ice stupa is being set up in Chile, in Switzerland, and so on. And this is the greening, which all done by our students and experientially. The third pillar of our education is that reality is composite. So we are moving away from subjects or specialities into themes. So for instance, one theme, or you could call it center of excellence, but is the rehabilitation of villages. So Kulum is a village very close to where we are, where half the village has moved to a neighboring village called Upshi because everything has dried up. The large homes have been left abandoned. People have locked their homes. The channels that brought and the canals have dried up. So the research question to our students was, can this again become a valley of flowers and a story of hope? And that's where 4 of the schools came together. The School of Ecology set up istupas there. The School of Agriculture and Forestry researched and planted trees, both for greening as well as agriculture and horticulture. And that brought in the subsistence agriculture to the village. The School of Eco-Responsive Buildings is now setting up passive solar retrofit buildings so that people can stay all through winter. And the School of Tourism is curating it as a edu tourism destination so that people from across the world can come and see how this village has been rehabilitated. And we call it transdisciplinary because the other villages may not have these problems. They may not have the problem of water, but something else. And that's where other disciplines would come in and solve. And I'm very happy to tell you that 2 years ago, after 15 years, 1,500 kilos of potatoes were harvested from this village. And last year, about 5,000 kilos of potatoes and 5,000 kilos of broccoli and so on. And half the village is already back and is planning to come back to the village. So contextual and experiential education is applied in a transdisciplinary way to solve these problems, which is our third pillar. And the fourth, as we know from Bloom's taxonomy, is that from remember to create when we go. And if we map it with our Indic knowledge system, this is, as the Bhagavad Gita says, remember and understand is the chitta, the memory mind, the sense mind. And apply and analyze is the manas. The create and evaluate is buddhi, the wisdom part. But in India, we go beyond the buddhi mind into the intuitive mind. And that is the fourth pillar of our education here, that when AI, like ChatGPT, etc., are staring in the face and taking away all the jobs, where are humans headed in the 21st century? And that's where we feel that it's only from here that AI can take away jobs. And if AI machines can do what humans were doing, then it's better that they do, because we don't need to dehumanize ourselves, whereas we need to grow more into our man and womanhood. And that is developing higher order thinking, intuitive thinking. What was a stray Bach or Mozart or Einstein creating, can we come up with an education and a pedagogy that we develop latent faculties of ourselves, a higher thinking mind and a deeper empathy. And that's what the machines and robots cannot, take away from us. And that makes us more human. So the fourth pillar of our education here is learning to think out of the box, not merely critical thinking, but creative design, intuitive, wise thinking, and deeper order feeling of empathy, oneness, interconnectedness, and kindness. So that is how we train our students to be. And the final pillar of education is that Sonam mentioned about the 3 R's of the Industrial Revolution, which was considered education as reading, writing, arithmetic. Then Gandhiji in his Nai Taaleem and other educational thinkers, they said that we have to move to 3H because 3R had only to do with the head, and we have to include our heart and hands. And we propose here at Hayal that we move to the next level of 3 A's, which is what would be India's gift to the world. And I borrow the terminology from the Kena Upanishad, that the hands correspond to what we call Adhibhuta, in our texts. Adhibhuta is materiality, the knowledge of the material world. And in this world, we also have Adhidaiva, which is the non-material forces, okay, the training of the feelings and emotions and the thoughts. And yet, it is only the Indian subcontinent and the East that had this wisdom that Adhibhuta and Adhidaiva are just two aspects of ourselves which are there when we are in birth. But there is a third aspect of us, which is Adhi-Atma, that is under the influence of the Atma, and that is spiritual education. And the Mother and Sri Aurobindo have in no uncertain terms said that India can only become the Vishwa Guru if spiritual education, if spirituality is made, Adhyatma is made part of the education. And Adhyatma is nothing, very difficult to understand. It is the purpose that we are born with, and which today is very famous in the form of Ikigai. It is that what is it that you are born with? And Ikigai says that you have to do what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at, not just what you can be paid for. But in India, we went beyond Ikigai into this understanding that what I can be paid for and what I am good at and what I love is what we call is my Swadharma. So spiritual education is helping the student find his or her Swadharma and align it with his Yuga Dharma, which is the need of the time today, and both of which are aligned to the Sanatan Dharma, which is the eternal truth of evolution of human consciousness. So for instance, my Swadharma can be I am a coder and today's Yuga Dharma is digital. But if I am not following the eternal dharma of evolution, then I can come up with these solutions like blue whale, which cause kids to commit suicide. So my Yuga Dharma and Swadharma, my Ikigai has to be aligned to the larger purpose of evolution of human consciousness. And that is the fifth pillar of our education at Hayal. And it is an imperative need that has to be brought in. Today it does not exist because the West maybe does not take it as an important thing. But India, if it is this one thing that it has to give to the world, it is this understanding. And this is our fifth pillar of education. And we were asked to, we never actually started out by aligning ourselves with SDGs, but one of the projects required us to map it. And we were so happy to know that out of the 17, we qualify for 16 SDGs at Hayal. The only one we don't qualify for is life on life below water, because we are a desert here and we do not have water. So that's the only one we do not align with. So this is something very important, that if we empower our youth in the right kind of education, then we automatically align with the larger universal goals. We don't have to fit ourselves to those. And also, we are absolutely aligned with the new education policy in being contextual, experiential, transdisciplinary, Indic knowledge systems, strong research culture. There is a very strong life skills that are inculcated in the students. All our solutions are not just sustainable, we go beyond sustainability into being regenerative and aligned with COP26, 27, carbon neutral goals, and so on. So there is an absolute alignment with new education policy. And I'm happy to present to you this infographic, which captures what we are doing at Hayal. And as the chairman sir also started the talk with, that the child or the student is at the center of the whole educational process. He or she is not considered as a metal that has to be hammered into some shape, but as a flower that has to be given the right ecosystem and has to be nurtured to realize its full potentiality. And that full potentiality can only be realized when we take the entire integral, holistic aspect of the human being, which is Adhibhuta, the materiality, the material nature, which can be developed through the knowledge of nature, by the understanding of the natural world and how the world works. And when we understand a context, its opportunities as well as its limitations, then we can engage with it, and it gives rise to material freedom. We know today the energy poverty in UK and the Western economies that have relied on Ukraine and other things, the global supply chains all failing, because that is not a sustainable way forward. Whereas Indian way of local contextual sustainability, where 80% of our staple needs are met locally. So we have a policy at Hayal, 100-kilometer radius. We try to solve everything within that. And that is what gives us material freedom. We'll always be abundant. And Adhidaiva is the non-material, the aspects of relational world, the knowledge of society, which can be developed by the understanding of the man-made world and ideas that change the world. And this can only happen when we encourage higher order thinking and deeper order feeling in the child. And that leads to social transformation. And finally, the aspect of ourselves, which is eternal, Adhyatma, is the knowledge of oneself, and which is developed by the understanding and experience of who I am and how can I best experience myself. And that can only happen through an experiential education, and that leads to personal transformation. So it is only material freedom, social transformation, and personal transformation, all three together, that can give rise to a happy, fulfilled individual and a sustainable, abundant, and a happy society. And that's what we achieve and aim to achieve at Hayal. And I'll be happy, I'm very happy to share that this infographic along with Hayal will be on permanent display at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London as an educational philosophy for the future. And so the world is now looking up to India for solutions, because it has reached a sort of a dead end, be it in climate change or in mental wellness and so on. And India, rightly so, has to rise to the occasion and give them the solutions. And we hope Hayal can in some way be that role model, not just for India, but for the whole world. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonamji and Geetanjali ji, for a wonderful presentation of the activities that you are carrying on in Ladakh. I have received many comments on our social media platforms, but just to summarize what our audience have felt about what you are doing in Ladakh, let me just quote Dr. Rajeshri Bongale. She is from Bharati Vidyapeeth, DTU Homeopathic Medical College, Pune. In her words, it's an innovative and interesting way of teaching and learning. And I couldn't agree more, because what you are doing is an integrated way of using our Indian knowledge systems, which has thrived for thousands of years and has become part of our living. Combine that with modernity. Now we can see from the pictures that you have shown, solar panels, for example, to generate electricity. So that's how we need to integrate our Indian knowledge systems and also the modern sciences. And the way you are doing is a template for the rest of the universities, because in the universities also now we are introducing many of these concepts to make our students sensitive towards their responsibility to the environment in which they are living, the people, the ecology, and so on. I'm sure visiting your place can provide that real experience of what you are doing there. I request all the heads of institutions and the teachers who are part of this platform to please get in touch with Sonamji and Geetanjali ji. Either you visit that place or you send teams of your students so that they interact with the students of their institution and learn from each other. Thank you very much for being part of today's lecture series. The forum is now open for any questions. We can take a couple of questions. We ran out of time. Now it is 11 o'clock. Or if any one of you, any heads of institution would like to say something, you are most welcome. You can raise your hand electronically, then we will unmute you. So I'm just looking at the screen in case if any one of you. We have Professor Shahid Rasool. Could you please speak?
Thank you very much, sir, for giving me an opportunity to speak. In fact, for me, it was refreshing to listen to both the speakers and the contribution they are making and the experimentation that they have been doing. It was more refreshing for me to listen to Mr. Wangchuk because I happened to visit his school some 12 years back when I was doing a film on SECMOL. Some of the ideas that he shared have been echoing in my mind since then. And I remember when one of my colleagues asked him, because he was so much fascinated the way the transaction of teaching and learning was taking place, he said that, how can my son be admitted in your school? And the quick response from Mr. Wangchuk was that he has to fail in 10th class. The boy did not fail in 10th class and he did not find space in SECMOL. So the very idea of this experiential learning and the experimentation that they are doing, eco-friendly environment in which they are trying to work, especially in a place like Ladakh, it is really fascinating, and it is really something that education needs to be. And National Education Policy 2020 really stresses these things. What is happening in SECMOL and what's happening in now in new institution, the higher education institution they are making, these all things are echoing, and this all reflected now in National Education Policy. But my worry is that we are living in a commercial world where the education is still driven by the Western thought. The normal school-going children and the normal families, the upper middle class and the middle class, even the people who live from hand to mouth, they save money to send their children to the normal schools which are driven by the Western thought. And most of our students, they are heading towards the West. Whether it is in IITs or IIMs or our best education institutions, the idea of a parent is simply to push the boy or the girl to become a high achiever, so-called high achievers. My question to both the speakers, to Sonam Wangchuk as well as to Dr. Angmu, is how can we bridge this gap quickly with the support of the present government? And we are happy that the Prime Minister of India has this a mission of achieving 50% GER by this next couple of decades, and then make educational system one of the best systems in the world. How can we bring the normal educational institutions quickly? Of course, there is a support from UGC, and it is being advocated that we must all have these ideas that have been shaped there. But there are issues still, where we have to convince the people to come to this alternative mode of teaching and learning. So what will be your suggestions, so that all our educational system takes up it quickly and we become the leaders, at the global level? Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. I do very much hope that this can come down to ground level and be an example. But for that, yes, one thing will be that we'll have to really make it obligational for all schools to actually implement. And while that can be done through trainings, workshops, encouragement, I think the examination system has to change ultimately. As long as our exam system still remains the same questions, answer, multiple choices, nothing experiential or analytical is going to happen. So maybe while for saving time and resource, we have some multiple choice questions also, we should have some even random questions that reflect the child's engagement and experiential part. For example, I've been suggesting to IITs who always complain that we get the wrong kind of students who are not interested in engineering, who just want the degree. So I've been saying it's all because your test is flawed. You test multiple choice and then you worry why wrong people come. You should have one question at least where a child has to, for example, put a disassembled clock back to assembly. And if you don't have time for 5 lakh students to do that, have it random. Just have 10,000 who by random chance get this question. And because there is a chance to get such things, this is just an example, there can be many, everybody will start preparing. Even parents who scold their children for breaking the clocks will bring 5 clocks to break and put back together. Similarly, coaching centers will start doing experiential because now this will come in IIT and board exams. So examinations, if they change, that will be one answer. On the other hand, maybe teachers should be tested also and given licenses in the new education policy only if they reflect and understanding of these principles and are themselves able to guide students through such experiential forms of education. Thank you.
Right. Professor C.S. Dubey, please go ahead. Professor Dubey,
You're muted.
Professor Dubey, can you hear me?
Yes. Now, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. So, after the COVID, there is a lot of, anxiety has gone away from the students, and they have become more lethargic. And when we try for this Indian knowledge system, they say why. So how to remove that question why in a broader sense, that is our problem. We are trying to solve problems by, as UGC and NAC has given us a lot of things like, life to live in the land, live in the lab and lab to land, many things we are doing. But unfortunately, that kind of motivation, we are trying to bring that, but it is not coming up. So can you suggest something up for that?
Yeah. So I think when we say Indic knowledge systems, so there is a difference in having something as a learning objective and coming and teaching it in the class. So we don't have to talk about Indic knowledge systems. We can live it, For instance, when we take students to the different palaces of India, of Ladakh, we don't tell them that we are going to do Indic knowledge systems. So all of these principles, like whether it is contextual, experiential, they stay in the backdrop of the teacher. And they are brought into the class as a live activity, which makes sense to them and which starts from a question that is there, next to them. So, for instance, we can start a class with teaching anatomy or physiology. That is one way of doing a medical science class. But the other way, the experiential way could be you bring a patient to the first year student who says, I have stomachache or I have a headache. And then you ask the student, okay, how would you go about solving his stomachache? And that's when you bring in all the knowledge and information that he might need, to solve that. So first create a need for that knowledge and the curiosity. And I do not agree that today's generation is less curious. I believe on the contrary, it's more curious. If they're not following, many parents say that children are not following the rituals in the house. So I tell them that please explain to them why you are doing it. So it's the parents and teachers who actually have to be educated first and be seeped into that knowledge systems and to understand why we are doing it and bring it to the child at the moment of his curiosity and his need. And that is where the teachers have to be trained to make it a very live, experience, this whole education. Thank you.
Thank you.
Completely agree with you, Geetanjali ji. Today's students are very aspirational. They want to challenge the status quo. They want to take the risks and learn from the failures that come from these risks. And that's the reason why today India is the third largest ecosystem for startup companies. If
Yes.
students are less motivated, if they are less averse to risk taking, that would not have happened. And as you rightly said, I think we need to motivate our teachers to adopt the changing pedagogical approaches so that they become effective mentors, nurturing our students. And Sonamji and Geetanjali ji, our thanks to you on behalf of UGC for sharing some of your experiences. And we hope that this lecture will be watched by thousands of others too, and they will also be motivated to bring in some of their practices in our regular university system also. So with those comments, we would like to conclude here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And before we conclude, Sonam and I invite you all to visit Ladakh and our school and our university.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All the best in
Thanks.
your efforts.